Utopia, an imaginary place or state of things in which everything, the government, laws, social conditions, architecture, and technology are perfect. Sir Thomas More, born in 1477, was the first person to write of a utopia in his book titled, you guessed it, Utopia, a word used to describe a perfect imaginary world. More's book imagines a complex, self-contained community set on an island in which people share a common culture and way of life. He coined the word utopia from the Greek o topos, meaning no place or nowhere. It was a pun. The almost identical Greek word eotopos means a good place. So at the very heart of the word is a vital question. Can a perfect world ever be realized? It is unclear as to whether the book is a serious projection of a better way of life, or a satire that gave More a platform from which to discuss the chaos of European politics. Utopia inspired many imaginary societies in the 16th and 17th centuries, and it very much influenced social reforms of the time. The main roots in utopian literature during this time were equality between sexes, religious toleration, preventative medicine, modern-day communism, and socialism. And the common factors were belief in the possibility of social reconstruction through an assertion of human willpower, and a sense of pessimism concerning present social conditions. This was balanced by a feeling of optimism about the future, a communal approach to the distribution of property, a greater concern for society as a whole rather than individuals alone, and belief in the utility of social institutions. Many believed that the inspiration for utopian literature was the transition between the medieval and Renaissance worlds. In other words, aspirations for a cohesive community, utopia, were a reaction against the increasingly divided and individualistic societies of the 16th and 17th century. Another influence was the New World exploration and scientific discoveries during the Renaissance, such as Columbus's first voyage to the New World in 1492, and Michelangelo completing the Sistine Chapel ceiling in 1512. Fun fact about our own country: colonies of Carolina, founded in 1670, Pennsylvania in 1681, and Georgia in 1733, were the only 3 English colonies in America that were planned as utopian societies and integrated physical and social utopian ideals into their economic design. Let's move on to utopia in the 20th century. The technological and social changes that marked the early 20th century affected the world with a vast social change. Machines began to fulfill many of the roles that had previously required skilled human labor, and society began to express a concern for their role in this new world. There was a growing concern for the preservation of the characteristics of humanity. Technology was seen as the herald of a new age to some, and a threat to humanity by others. Italian architect Antonio Sant'Elias' La Città Nuova was one of the designs most symbolic of the futurist ideology. Unlike classic sprawling metropolises, his city of the future was centralized mass of skyscrapers interconnected by bridges, aerial walkways, and exterior elevators. The mechanized city was designed around a lifestyle that always looked to the future and held a foundation in renewal, constantly demolishing outdated structures to make way for newer technology. While many modernist utopian societies centered around densely packed cities, Frank Lloyd Wright rejected urban areas altogether and fled to the suburbs. In 1932, Wright created Broadacre City, named because each family received a 1-acre plot of land. Low-density development centered around automobile transit and embraced the benefits of the countryside. Wright also conceived the aerator, a small helicopter provided for each family that could land without a landing strip. Wright's utopian city was born from a disgust with city life. Today's version of utopia has changed quite drastically from the views held by the last generation. Now, instead of seeking to create a perfect place to live, it seems we are focusing on the failures of utopian society. We have movies, video games, and books that seem to showcase what our view of utopia has become. Movies like Divergent, for example, show a post-apocalyptic Chicago that has put in place so-called factions to keep every member of society doing their specific part to maintain a peaceful and perfect world. This, of course, completely falls apart shortly after the movie begins and goes on to become a 3-movie series about how it all failed so horribly. Another example, the Hunger Games series. This story focuses on a futuristic world, all but recovered from massive wars with each other, and now divided into 11 districts that basically function to support an extremely wealthy 12th district. This is meant to be a peaceful society, but falls apart due to the extreme gladiator games that are forced on the inhabitants of the 11 districts to, quote, remember where we were and not repeat such mistakes. But let's forget about movies for a minute. Do we have anything resembling utopia in the real world right now? Dubai is a beautiful city to many people. It has incredible new buildings and futuristic architecture. It's clean and full of wealth, supercars, and freaking ski slopes in the middle of the freaking desert. They even have started creating islands in the shape of palm trees in the world map. It certainly looks more like utopia. However, just outside the city is one of the poorest parts of the world, mostly populated by migrant workers that live in shanty towns and often commit suicide due to poor working conditions and extremely low wages. It would not be far-fetched for you to assume that at this point, when speaking about utopia, most of us think of dystopia instead. However, there are still examples of modern-day utopias that at least seem feasible for a better future society. Masdar City is a planned city project in Abu Dhabi. It is a city built to be the environmentally friendly utopian city of the future. It's carbon neutral, pedestrian friendly, and powered by renewable energies, such as solar panels on the roof structures. All transportation vehicles are underneath the city, leaving the streets of Masdar totally free of cars. Being a pedestrian-only zone has enabled them to push the buildings together and create more shade. The city resembles a medieval town more than our typical idea of the future city. But doing this has allowed them to create a city with a scale based on the human being and not the car. So really, it seems like we've been going in circles, so to speak. And in conclusion, it's not likely that true utopia will ever exist. However, if you strive for perfection, settling for greatness isn't such a bad result.